Hello, everybody. I would like to thank you for joining us here today for ABIS webinar on digitalization and new business value. We're sorry we have a little delay. We were waiting for all the participants to sign up. We will be talking about how businesses respond to the march of digitalization, how they search for new business models, and how they can create value for society using digital data. My name is Katarina Halushkova, and I'm the communication coordinator at ABIS, the Academy of Business and Society that organized this webinar. Today, we will be having two special speakers, Rashik Parmar, a distinguished engineer and technical executive at IBM, Okechukwu Okorie, research assistant at Cranfield University. To tell you something about this webinar, it's going to last up to 1 hour. At the end of the webinar, we will have some time to answer your questions. You do not need to wait until the very end of the webinar to write them down. Feel free to send them throughout the whole webinar. You can find the question function on this platform in the lower part of the GoToWebinar panel. As we are a smaller webinar, there might be a possibility for you to actually say the question out loud or comment on the topic in the end. So if you'd like to do so, please raise a hand and I will unmute you so that you can talk to our panelists. Without further ado, I will give the word to our first speaker, which is going to be Okechukwu Okorie. I'm going to share his screen in a moment. And the floor is yours. Over to you, Okechukwu.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good morning from the UK. I believe you can see my screen. My first slide should have digitalization and new business value. So my name is Okechukwu Okorie, and I'm a postdoctoral research assistant here at Cranfield University. And I have been working on the area of digitalization, Industry 4.0, and circular economy for about 3 to 4 years now. And we've had some papers published in this area, and we have been working with a few manufacturing companies, but these actually cuts across to retail, to the FMCG and on other other industries. So I'll just quickly go ahead. So the first thing I need to do is to first of all make a differentiation here. So we have the term digitization and digitalization. These two terms have always been confused by people who want to explore the area. But just to quickly set this straight, so digitization is the technical process of converting streams of analog data into digital numbers. That's your binary numbers, ones and zeros. And digitalization is the adoption or the increase in the use of digital technologies by an organization, industry, or the society. So basically, you could say digitization is actually a subset of digitalization. So we are focusing on digitalization today. So now these are the research numbers. I beg your pardon. I should have the notes. I don't know if I can't see my notes here, but these are the information from research. So what I did was to run a few search trends on Scopus. It's an academic database, and digitalization on Scopus. If you can see on chart A from 1998 to 2018, there was a spike in research from 2016 to 2018. And also I did run digitalization with other emerging terms like circular economy and obviously new business value on Scopus. And you can see the numbers there as well. The spike also began in 2016. So we can basically conclude here that while the research in digitalization has been ongoing for a while, it has been quite insignificant, but it has picked up quite significantly in the last 3 years. And we can also conclude that research in digitalization and its application in terms of circular economy, in terms of new business value, is still very, very, very small. It's still very, very small in comparison to the overall research area of digitalization. So quickly, there is a term which would come up when when you do research on digitalization. That's in Industry 4.0. So I'm sure some of us would have heard that term before. So it's the integration of complex physical machinery and devices with networks, sensors, and software for predicting and controlling, planning, and better business. So we have the first industrial revolution. We began at the end of the 18th century, and right now we are in the fourth industrial revolution period, which is basically based on CPS or cyber physical systems, and is actually in place to drive a higher level of operational efficiency and productivity, as well as a higher level of automation. Is the goal of Industry 4.0. So if we can look at if you see the diagrams on the left part of my screen, we can see what we call base technologies. So that is the digital technologies that companies would have to adopt as it is right now to digitalize their entire business or their operations. And these integrate with the front end technologies as well. Smart supply chain, smart working, smart manufacturing, and smart products. Okay. Okay, so just to quickly look at value in manufacturing. So we have 5 key digital trends, or I would say pervasive these are trends and technologies. This is AI and machine learning and data analytics. We have additive manufacturing, robotics and automation, virtual reality, augmented reality, and the industrial Internet of Things and connectivity. We must have heard of the word IoT before. Now, while this looks like software technologies that might be inclined towards manufacturing, is actually much broader. It can affect manufacturing, but also can affect also other industries as well, which I will show in the next few minutes. So for a manufacturing business, you can either digitalize your operations in degrees. Okay, so if you want to go say full digitalization of your entire operation, that might not be efficient in the long run. In the short term, I beg your pardon, because it could be quite expensive. So what we've seen is that people digitalize part of the operation, then before they digitalize the entire operation. So there is from the Made Smarter review, which is a reference we see online. These are the advantage or the values you can get in manufacturing. So there's a reduction in plant maintenance costs, forecasting accuracy, inventory reduction, reduction of machine downtime, and obviously this has economic benefits as well. Now I can, if we have questions on this, I can explain in detail these different values for manufacturing at the end of this session. Okay. So how does this interaction generate other forms of business value? So this diagram is just to show here that now you have a digitalized space when you have the business and also digital technologies integrating together. We expect the value from digitalization should start at the point of initial digitalization and then should actually spread to the whole part of the business. So for instance, if you have a retail company which intends to digitalize, say, just its logistics arm, while this is being digitalized, the customers eventually would have will have value even just from that operation, the logistics business being digitalized. So this is expected to diffuse across the entire business. Now, one of that value as well that I wanted to mention was the sustainability initiatives that happens when you digitalize a business. So intelligent assets basically are assets that can communicate. They could have embedded sensors in them. They could be connected to wireless network on your phone, that's your IoT. These are called intelligent assets. Digitalization will help to extend the use cycle of products, monitor performance, redefine maintenance as well, design development, and also improve components and products. And this also extends beyond the manufacturing sector. There is a project which I'm currently the lead researcher in, and that is actually looking at the remanufacturing business. Remanufacturing is an end-of-life function, which is being run at the moment by normal traditional manufacturing means. So this picture is from one of the remanufacturing plants, which I was visited last year. And we're trying to see how digitalization can actually help improve their business. And from the initial research, there is a lot of improvement. I mean, there are some improvement which we've seen. We have come up with a function which we call this certainty in product quality, and that's called that's the CPQ, and it has many variables that feed into it. And the time the product spent in this assembly, clean, and inspection is actually reduced and made more efficient with digitalization. And this can be measured based on this CPQ. Just quickly go to the next page and having so this is a hydrogen fuel cell car by a company which it's called River Simple in the UK, and we're also doing some work with them in terms of understanding how digitalization from their product to the entire business, how it would how it will affect the entire business. So the questions we're asking here is what in-service data is required to inform decisions on the optimum life cycles of whole system component, part and subsystem, thus keeping the car in valuable service for as long as possible. So that's one thing we expect digitalization to do, to extend the life time of the product before it gets to the end of life. So just go to my next slide. So I did mention briefly about retail. Now these are some opportunities which we've seen in in retail. So if customers share their data, we know customers are normally quite trendy. They all have smartphones. We expect retailers to take advantage of the insights of this data to provide targeted and differentiating experience to their consumers. Right now, brand loyalty is not a driver for consumers. I mean, myself, when I want to buy clothes, I don't. I mean, I may have particular I am company which I would chase up for clothes, but I'm not very loyal to them. I'm more keen on service and the faster delivery, which I feel a large percentage of people would agree to. Now, when these companies see these, my data map, you can actually run efficient and flexible supply chain system, linking your goods to their customers. And this operates better when you have a digitalized chain. That's from the supplier to the company, the retailer themselves, and to the consumers. Okay, just go to the next slide. Hi, Katrina, can you help me with the next slide? Okay, it's gone. All right, and then this is also John Lewis. Now we expect digitalization to bring forth new business models. This is a John Lewis model, which is actually looking at how they can use digitalization to reduce the amount of products that goes into the landfill. So they have an estimate about 140 million worth of clothing products goes into landfill each year. I mean, that's globally. And these are the stats for the UK. Now, within a digitalized space, we expect these to actually reduce through these four steps here. Um, so just go. I'm trying to be a bit fast. Now, this is also Shoe Lab, which is based in Brixton. They have a business model which I talked about. So digitalization can produce new business models which are circular in design. So you have new business models which are circular in design. By circularity in design means that you have a product that stays in use for a long time. So that improves sustainability, and that basically would mean that the the company can open up a space for doing other things as well. So just to go quickly to the last few slides. So what does value, what do value do, what does, I beg your pardon, what value does digitalization bring to businesses? So we expect that it brings an enabling feedback rich system. So your production is no longer one way, customer centricity as well. So everything is customer focused. You work with what your customer wants, and obviously what this means is that you have less stock holding in your warehouse. So you have opportunity to connect with consumers, users of the product, materials, product flows, and their real value, enabling circular business models such as product and service, opportunity to design for quality and durability as opposed to obsolescence. Open innovation, the user becomes co-creator, access to implicit user behavior, needs and values, experimentation and more intelligent product development, and encourage to take a systemic approach, not only concerned with one product, and monetizing new customer offers. So now digitalization, we from the one paper which we wrote at Cranfield last year, it to effectively digitalize a company or an industry. It's not something that the industry can achieve alone. Yes, they do have they do have the data and obviously the experience, but it has to be a collaboration between the industry, policymakers, and especially the academia. And so these are our final thoughts here. Now, 54% of retailers say customer experience is their most important area, which is a very great percentage. And by 2020, that's just next year, 21 billion connected devices will be in use, and over 65% of them will be consumer touch points. So basically, consumers can get in touch with their with companies. So now this data, it would increase in the next by 2035. The numbers are in the quintillion figures, and what can we do with this information? So we're saying here the systemic approach to design and collaboration is important to take this forward. New business value for partial and full business digitalization implementation. So we would have to decide at what stage do you digitalize, at what degree, to what degree do you digitalize. That conversation, it's a research conversation so that you don't incur unnecessary costs and you get full value for digitalization. Technology enabled products as opposed to technology driven. New methods of understanding and using new user insight. Fundamental understanding of how digitalization can enable economic sustainability. Academic institutes need to adapt to new ways of learning, so that is our responsibility as academia. And industry-based learning, this is also quite key. So thank you very much. I have been trying to use up just 10 minutes. I hope that this was useful for us today. And if you have any questions, or if you want me to drill, into more details of anything I've said today, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Okechukwu. It was very interesting. Exactly like you said, if you have any questions, please feel free to send it to us in the question section on the control panel of your GoToWebinar. And now we will slowly give the floor to Rashik Parmar, as I said, the distinguished engineer and technical executive at IBM, to talk more about this issue. Rashik, over to you.
Great, thank you very much. And so as we start to think about the journey that previous speakers kind of mentioned, we're all faced with this challenge of how do we find our space in this digital disruption that comes from digitization and digitalization, as we mentioned earlier.
Actually, I'm sorry, Rashik. Just to not disrupt you later on, maybe you can make the full screen of your presentation, and also if you can hide the control panel of your GoToWebinar so we don't see it.
Okay, I'm just trying to move that. So how do I? Can I move that? Is that fine there? So I'm on full screen show at the moment.
All right. Yes, great.
Okay. Okay, is that looking good?
Yes, to me it looks perfect.
Okay, so as I mentioned, as we start to think about our journey into digital disruption and becoming a disruptor, we've got to try and understand what's happening, and some of the points mentioned earlier would help, but also we've got to understand what matters to us, and often this is coming back to the things that we really value, and the first thing that you start to realize as you go on this journey is that technology's kind of crept up on us to a point where technology is in all aspects of our life. I can't go to the tap and turn the tap on and expect to get water from that tap unless there was some technology behind the scenes allowing that to become possible. I can't go to the supermarket and buy some food without some technology behind the scenes. So technology is pretty much everywhere in our lives, and it's kind of become a fabric without us realizing. And if we go back and look at what the best way to think about it is if you think about back in the 1940s, there's actually a picture from the First National Bank of Chicago, and in that banking hall we saw thousands of people working that were doing the accounts. They actually physically wrote the accounts for the clients of the bank, and through this notion of productivity and automation, we've gradually replaced those roles, and they've become infused into technology. And technology has been progressing constantly to a point where we can argue that we may have hit what we might refer to as the law of diminishing marginal returns. So are we at the point today where we've done as much productivity improvement as we can in all aspects of our life, and is this kind of the end of the road for technology? And as you start to think through this whole question, you start to realize, well, actually, maybe not, right? And maybe there's something very different here, which is we're entering disruption. It's not about automating the ways we've done things in the past. It's about starting to think about something completely different. And that's where the disruption part comes in. And it's trying to help us understand what is that disruption that's going to come forward, and why is that disruption going to take place? And that's the real question I think people are trying to ask and understand as we go forward. So there's a piece of thinking that we did over a sort of 10 to 15 year period, where we looked at a range of these digitization or digitalization projects, and we uncovered there are actually three underlying laws of what's going on here, and you need to all understand these laws if you want to be successful in this program. in this journey rather. And the first one is you realize that if it can be digitized, then somebody will find a way of doing it. Now, it might sound blindingly obvious, but actually it's an important law. So if there is an opportunity for digitizing it, somebody will find a way of doing it. The second thing you very quickly realize is that once you do digitize it and you go through the full digitalization, then aspects of what we've done in the past tends to become free. So you release cost out of doing that transformation. And that's the kind of elephant in the room that nobody really wants to talk about, but actually is something that we've got to all fully understand. And that's what workers in the Chicago factory felt many years ago, and everybody's fearful of how digitalization will decimate jobs and work and so on. And that's really where the third law becomes really important. And this says the way we use data in digitalization. So one of the byproducts of digitalization is we create new data, new digital data. And it's what we do with that data is a pathway to create this new value. So as you think through these three laws, and these laws are kind of happening whether we like them or not, you start to understand the opportunity going forward. So let's start to understand more what we do with this digital data, which creates value. And this links directly to the notion of sustainability. So we go back and think about where is there inefficiency in systems today, and where's the opportunity to actually improve the efficiency of the system. So this chart gives you an assessment where a number of economists came together a couple of years ago to look at the wastage that exists inside different industries. Right? So you look at healthcare, for example, there's a significant amount of systemic inefficiency in the process, and the opportunity for improvement is massive. Similar with government, the way government works, similarly inside building structure. And the numbers on the chart actually represent billions of dollars of economic opportunity there. So you can kind of see the scale of opportunity. So the total of this is it's around about $4 trillion of opportunity that can be opened up by applying this kind of thinking into the space. So when we think about driving the whole sustainability agenda, it's about us actually understanding where the opportunity for greater levels of efficiency. And what we've done in the past is looked at efficiency as primary productivity. It's now efficiency not within the processes within an organization necessarily, but it's efficiency across multiple processes, multiple organizations. And so you start to think more about what is it that people will value? What's that data really going to do to create new value? And part of this thing is people will pay for new experiences, and the new experiences will actually be the pathway to create that new value. And you might think, well, that's a bit abstract. I don't really understand what you're talking about here. So let's take a real example. And many of us will use taxis in the past, and many of us were familiar with Uber. So let's just think about what happened as Uber came along. We have that disruption that this Uber platform created. But what was the real experience that we created here? And understanding that really helps us. So if I go back, say, 10 years ago, and I phoned a taxi company and said, I'd like a taxi to go from where I am here to the airport. And the taxi controller said, well, that taxi is going to take 10 minutes. You kind of knew that was at best a good guess. And they had lots of systems to help them make a good guess. At worst, that was a just complete lie, right? But you did not know as a consumer whether this was real or not. And the taxi would sometimes come in 5 minutes, sometimes it would come in half an hour, sometimes it would take longer, right? But you had no transparency into that service. So what Uber did as part of the app is they provided a digital representation of the taxi on an app, and you could see where that taxi was. So when they accepted that journey, you can see where the taxi is and how long it's going to take to get to you, and you can see the traffic pattern. And all of a sudden, you had a very different experience of using that service. And that new experience is actually then what the taxi companies had to then create. So in the past, their processes were very opaque to the consumer. They had to become transparent. They had to create some of those new experiences because that's what Uber had set as a standard. Right? And so as we start to think forward, we start to realize actually there are some very simple patterns for how the new business models in this digitalization process will come about. And these are the 5 generic patterns, and the papers published in Harvard Business Review in 2014. So we'd worked for around about 10 years analyzing a large number of early stage digitalization projects, and we started to find these 5 intrinsic patterns. So the first pattern is really simple, and to a certain extent, it's almost blindingly obvious when we realize what was going on. So manufacturer of goods, as they create the product, they spend huge amounts of effort making sure the product is just perfect. It leaves the factory gates, and for the majority of the cases, as soon as that product leaves the factory gates, the manufacturer loses contact with that. And we don't really get any insight into what's happening with that product when the consumer or the owner of that product is using that product. And what's now possible through things like Industry 4.0, IoT, cloud, sophisticated sensors, actuators, a whole bunch of technology, we're now able to augment that product with sensors and connectivity, and that allows us to generate new data. And the ability to generate that new data gives us 2 opportunities. The first opportunity is we can use that data to improve the product experience in itself. But more interestingly, we can use that data and that new connectivity to create new services for that consumer. And that might be predictive maintenance, it might be improving the performance of the product, or it may be providing completely new services to that consumer that we hadn't thought about before. So when we start to think about, for example, Rolls-Royce, and we talk about this in the paper, Rolls-Royce used this ability to sense the aero engine to be able to transfer that from being a product they sold to being something that allows us to provide power by the hour. So they own the whole supply chain, the logistics chain that sits behind the airline to ensure that engine continues to perform at peak performance, is there in delivering on the kind of sustainability needs, but also delivering on the business needs, the performance needs, the cost points, and so on. And they're responsible for all aspects to be able to ensure that that engine has peak performance. So that's the first pattern. So we see manufacturers augmenting products with technology, infusing technology in those products to be able to generate new data and create new value on top of the data that they get from that and the new connectivity and service around that. The second pattern says anything that's people-centric or service-centric, we will find ways of automating the work that's done by the people, and that automation, what we call codification of that work, codification of that will allow us to offer that as a service or a capability and share that with people. So in essence, we start to create platforms of service, which are virtual platforms in the cloud, which we can then use to create new value. And this is in essence hollowing out services in businesses. So we see that with things like HR, things like Salesforce. We see that in retailing through things like Amazon and so on. So the ability to be able to automate more and more of the work of people becomes another distinct kind of trend going forward. The third pattern says, as you get a value chain that spans multiple organizational boundaries, there's inbuilt inefficiencies. And we saw that earlier in the chart where we saw the inefficiency in all the industries. But our ability to build a trusted data source across the value chain, and then combine the data across the industries, and then automate the processes and remove the inefficiencies and create great, significant kind of sustainable advantage through that, we're able to start to transform that process and unlock some of the inefficiencies and create new value for us in that way. And this is what we see with things like smarter transportation initiatives, smarter energy distribution, smarter cities programs. All of these things are very much trying to find those pieces. And a great example, I guess, is the Maersk Trade Lens program, where we were building a blockchain across trade finance. So all the paperwork that goes with shipping goods from a factory to a distributor, we have the ability to see across all of that value chain. We simplify and automate a lot of the trade data movement, the documentation that goes with the trade. So that's the third pattern. The fourth pattern says any data that an enterprise has can actually be used as a tradable asset, and it's a value to an adjacent organization. And this is quite a quite a kind of surprising kind of notion that data can be seen as a tradable asset. And the example that we often look at is Vodafone, right? So Vodafone, just by providing a mobile phone network, they know where a mobile phone is because of triangulation of the base station, so on, and they can overlay the mobile phone trajectory and speed onto a map. And as soon as they overlay that data onto a map, they start to create high resolution traffic data. And it's actually what they sell that high resolution traffic data to people that provide satellite navigation systems as a service, and they create millions of dollars of value for themselves by doing that. Now that's an obvious example once you see it, but actually in business, all the data that businesses have is of huge value to other enterprises, if only it could be packaged and made available in the right kind of way. So the fourth pattern is how we use that data as a tradable asset. And the final pattern is anything that's physical that we can't augment or necessarily want to augment, creating a digital representation of those assets allows us to create new interaction patterns and create completely new value. And actually the Uber example and Airbnb are really good examples here, where creating a digital representation of the taxi on a map allowed us to create a completely new interaction pattern and a completely new platform, new business on top of this kind of taxi business. Similar with Airbnb, assets in the form of homes that were empty, we could use this new digital representation of the home to be a way of making other people and selling your spare capacity. So we can see huge things that could be done around that and would actually create significant value. And so as we start to think forward, what becomes apparent is what's going on in this process is actually these three equations, okay? And the first equation is where I has been for the last, I would say, 50, 60 years. And that's been that we've been creating digital data. We've been applying algorithms and logic in the form of analysis to that data and deriving new information. And that information has been helping improve productivity, helped a whole bunch of things. And that's an equation that we've kind of understood. What we're moving to now with this next wave of technology is saying, if we take that information and put that into a context, into an AI system or some kind of sophisticated model, we can create new insight. But that in itself, those two equations are the equations of cost. The value really comes when we invoke an action from somebody. So that insight creating an action creates an outcome. So what used to happen before was the top equation, the data plus analysis information, was dependent on a human, the brain of a human to do that creating the context, create the insight before we invoke the action. But through the emergence of AI and cloud and some more sophisticated technologies, we're able to create that new context, and that's where the new value really comes. And so as you start to understand these three equations, you start to realize there are actually new competencies that are emerging. And what we need to do is to start to understand what are the competencies that people will need to have to be successful in their digitalization journey. So part of this journey is we've got to realize that the three laws of digitization. We've got to understand the new experiences that we're trying to create. We've got to understand the new kind of business model where we'll capture value from this. We've still got to be able to apply these equations in a sustainable and an effective way. And so what we've learned is that there are actually 5 core competencies that come about, and these are, if you like, the data savvy competencies that we need going forward. The first competency is linked to the squirrel, and it's about gathering the data. So how do we innovate and manage and control and understand the data that we actually have? And these squirrels are great at gathering the data, hoarding the data, cataloging the data. You could kind of think of them as the modern day librarians. The second category of individual is the visionary, the owl, somebody who can bridge from the digitalization domain across into the business outcome domain. They have the ability to see the 360-degree view of what's possible. They start to see what's possible with the data they have, the data that might exist elsewhere, and combine the data. So it's using that whole view of the data, the outcome, the issues, the opportunities, and creating that vision of the future. The third category of individuals are the theorists. So these are the foxes or wolves, and they're the algorithmic geeks. They may be what we might call a true data scientists. And these people are able to do magic with bits of Python and R code and create magical insights and create these new sophisticated AI models, which give us the insight that we need, right? And they prove that some of this technology can have real impact, and they use what the gatherers produce and the visionaries to make some of these viable. And then often organizations kind of forget about the next piece, which is we refer to as a weaver bird. So it's a small bird, as you can see in the picture there. The bird is able to build these quite big, sophisticated nests from little pieces of twigs. And these are data engineers, and they worry about how they take the insights and the approach that the theorists have created, and ensure the data quality that the data gatherers worry about. And so basically, they're worrying about the engineering of systems which allow the scale, the reliability, the affordability of the service to be able to meet the business demand. And the last animal there is the hawk. And the thing about the hawk is they tend to fly high above, and they worry about the ethics and privacy and legality of what we do. And they are, if you like, the righteous. So they worry about all of those aspects and make sure that what we're doing with these projects is appropriate and sensible and feasible. And it's a combination of those 5 competencies, this zoo, if you like, which allows individuals and organizations to find the right path into this opportunity for digitalization going forward. And often, when we think about that whole sustainability piece, the righteous is worrying about that, but actually you've got to bring that across the whole spectrum here. So as we look through this and think, well, okay, so how does this change the nature of work and the nature of business going forward? And there's this kind of doomsday scenario of, well, this is work is disappearing and it's all going to be leisure time. But actually, I think that's not true. I think we're missing the real point here. There's very few people who I see in the business world who are saying they're underworked and they don't have enough work to do. Everybody's hugely overworked. So we see this as augmenting the work of people. It's about taking the routine aspects of what people do and finding ways of eliminating that to give them time to do the things that they want to do and they really want, they prefer to do. So we just discuss this as kind of new collar work. It's becoming very outcome led. It's very unpredictable. So we're focused much more on doing things which have an unpredictable nature. They don't have a routineness, if you like, because a lot of the routine stuff is being replaced. But fundamentally, the work is about creating new business models. Okay? And so this what we might refer to here as an agile or a a data savvy business. Those are three of the aspects. But at the same time, that the working practices, the things that people really value in the way they go about doing the work. There's three new aspects in here. The first thing is it's very agile, so it embraces a lot of that agile manifesto, and really works towards doing things real practical and kind of forming small squads and trying to get something done to see what's possible rather than overthinking this. At the same time, there's this undercurrent of being digital savvy, and there's a core kind of digital competence and wanting to do this in a very digital and a contemporary way. And then the last piece is that I think creativity becomes much more prevalent. So it allows people to do things which really tap into their underlying creativity. And then the last piece is that people will do this, and the nature of work will be based on values which are slightly different to the values that we see today. So the notion of meaningful work, doing work where they see it has a very clear purpose, has societal value, has things that humanity would relate to, becomes quite high on the list of priorities. And against that, they see the work as driving the right kind of progress, tied to their personal ethics and their own beliefs. And underpinning that, we start to see the emergence of metrics which are much more appropriate. Rather than just measuring activity, we start to measure the actual outcomes, and we start to become much more focused around the outcomes. And so as I kind of think through this whole digitalization journey, I see this as an opportunity for progress in a way which creates a society that I think we want to be part of, rather than necessarily the society that we all know and are familiar with, and has a set of challenges which we want to try and overcome. So I think that kind of summarizes what I wanted to talk through here. So Katrina, I think we can open up to some questions. Or
All right. Thank you very much. Yes, I'll. All right. I would like to thank you very much for your terrific presentation. Now we still have some time for questions. If anybody feels that they want to ask something, please either put your question in the question panel, or you can raise your hand and I can actually unmute you so you can say it out loud. Also, if any of you, our presenters, Rashik or Okechukwu, want to comment on each other, please feel free to do it now while we wait for a question that might arise.
I think from my perspective, the two talks were very complementary. So I think the points that were mentioned earlier, they're very complementary there.
Great. Exactly.
Yeah, I just got a quick question for Rashik. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last the second to the last slide, I think, where you had those 5 competencies. I was wondering, what was the research which you did to come up with that?
So we analysed 30 digitalization projects across Europe with clients that we've been working on, and what we tried to find was.
Were they from specific industries, or was that across?
No, it was cross industries. So we had industrial, we had retailing, some banking, and life science, I think, was also there.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, what we found is the projects that failed. So of the 30 that we looked at, over half of them had failed, and you could see very quickly by missing one of these competencies, you've risked the project of not succeeding.
Okay, so those 5 competencies are important for every industrial sector.
Yeah, and so it doesn't have to be in one person. You could have them in multiple. You could have, say, 2 of them in one person. What we didn't find was anyone that could cover all 5. We could certainly see 2, like for example, the theorists and engineers could be combined. The visionaries and the theorists can combine sometimes. The gatherers and engineers can combine. So there are combinations which work, and obvious ones which are mutually exclusive as well. So that's these were competencies rather than roles. That's the point I was trying to make.
Okay.
I can see that we have one hand that is up. So from Peter Leva. So now I can unmute you and you can tell your question to one of our panelists. You can talk now.
Hello, good morning. My name is Peter, and thank you so much for the webinar. It's been very great so far. I really enjoyed both the presentation. I was interested in the angle. So Rashik was talking about the digital journey, and we had the other presentation that also gets some part related to circular economy transition. So I've been attending many conferences lately about circular economy, and I was interested maybe to try to understand, according to the 3 logic that Rashik explained towards the end of the webinar, the fact that I've been reading many business cases about circular economy, and what I can feel now is that companies were able to produce data and analysis and so arrive to this logic of information. But then when we go to the second logic in order to create insight, I think that the assumption on the context are today should be completely different. So some work that I'm doing about training and leadership development, I was interested to know by Rashik, how do you think, which skills do you think are the most needed in order to define a new context? The engineering or the theories? Because I can feel that many business model, like the one of Rolls-Royce, I've seen it, I read it about it, it's great. Now they gain more from services than from production. But it's a very high intensive manufacturing system that allows Rolls-Royce to gain more from service, because now their engine can produce data, so they know exactly when do they need to be served. So for all the rest, I think that the context should change, and talking about creating new type of leader, which type of skill do you think they need in order to understand how to change the context? Thank you.
Yeah. So I think for this, I would say you actually need all 5 competencies, right? Because when you look at changing context, you need a strong visionary who can actually explain this new service and this new circular economy that we're moving to, and articulate in a way which is both interesting and motivational and all those kinds of things, but also they can see the societal value of that at the same time. In parallel to that, you also need the right data. So you need the gatherers to help you understand the right data to be able to go and make that economy possible. And then as you build the context itself and build the tools, there are many technological barriers you come to. So the theorists have got to be able to figure out the logic of that new context and make sure that this all hangs together, and overcome often some technological or mathematical barriers. But at the same time, once you've done all that, you still need to be able to keep that running and deliverable and all that kind of good things. and the issue often comes that ownership or access to the data is restricted for all kinds of reasons, and so the need for the righteous to be able to break through some of the litigation issues, some of the underlying ownership issues is required. It doesn't matter which of those kind of circular economy projects, and we'll look at a few. You need those 5 competencies across the base to be able to make these things work.
Great, thank you for your answer. We actually have one more question, if we have the time to do so, and it is, what should business schools focus on in their curriculum offerings in order to meet the future competency demands?
So I would say the biggest thing that business schools need to do is to help break down some of the faculty or the departmental barriers. If we can start to bring cross-disciplinary teams together and allow them to look at the problem from different disciplines at the business school, before they go into the workplace, we start to build some of the core skills that we'll need going forward to make these things possible.
Yeah, and I'll also add, now from what we've seen, the trends we've seen with digitalization is that there's a lot of research in the management aspect of digitalization, but the implementation aspect that has to do with the science of digitalization there's not sufficient work being done there. So business schools, like what Rashik did say, business schools, I mean, in my opinion, are the ones that can bring these competencies together, because as the competencies exist, but they are operating in their own individual pockets. You can't really do much in terms of what we want to achieve. So bringing the competence together so that we can then have the science and the management aspect working together is what business schools should actually put a business case for it to whoever is in charge, and so that's what they should do. Else you would have a situation where one side of the work is being done and the other side is not being done, and then no one would have the rationale to go ahead to digitalize, which is not what we want to see. And also a quick addition as well. Rashik did talk about it, but one question which I have been asked in a few conferences I've gone to is the human cost to digitalization. So people still have that argument, no matter how we tell them that no, digitalization will improve and there will be less labor, there will be less cost to in terms of job losses. So that research should be something I believe the business schools can have the competence to drive. Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Great. Thank you very, very much for answering the 2 questions. As it seems, we do not have any more questions, and we are actually running out of time. I would like to thank first our speakers for their great performance. Thank you, Rashik. Thank you, Okechukwu, and for your time that you devoted to it and for the insights that you provided us. It's been a lovely time with you. If anybody has more questions and would like to continue discussing this topic, please, we have a LinkedIn group on LinkedIn about digitalization. It's called ABIS Digitalization. So please feel free to join us there. And you can also follow ABIS social media channels. We have Twitter and LinkedIn, as you can see on the screens. You will have the recording from the webinar available, and we will send it to you by email. So now I would like to thank you, our participants, for watching us, and have a great day.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.